clap it up for Angela and the Feathers today. Yes, yes. Good morning, everybody. My name is Malcolm Coley. I am the Chief Technology Officer of Futures First Gaming. We are an educational technology, esports entertainment, and media company focused on bringing the underrepresented into technology, skills, and opportunities through esports. Hence the reason why we are here. And I had two luminaries next to me. Luminaries. If you guys weren't at the Tech Mr. Awards yesterday, Miss Angela and Miss Amber, they were both honored as luminaries in this space. So please stand up and give them a round of applause for that. So, yes, thank you for that. They are very deserving of that award, right? So I want to start with you, Angela, because you're right next to me. Tell the folks who you are.
Hi everyone, I'm Angela Roseboro. I am the founder of the Roseboro Group, which is a consulting firm for startup businesses, really talking about culture and making sure they do it intentionally. My background has been in HR and DEI for the past, I want to say 30 years. I started this when I was in my early 30s. I worked in manufacturing, I worked in finance, I worked in professional services. Most recently, I worked at a company called Riot Games, if you've ever heard of it. I was the Chief Diversity Officer right around the time where I think a lot of gaming companies were going through this kind of cultural reckoning. And so was there for took 4 years of my life, which was great. I want to talk a little bit about that experience, and learned a lot about how do you create cultures, working with founders. And what I realized is that founders are innovators, and they grow to be CEOs. So my passion in life, or my purpose in life, is to make sure that every new CEO really thinks about culture intentionally. So that's what I've been doing. I got a couple of clients right now. I took a year off after 4 years. I went to Marrakesh with my daughter. I went to Hawaii with my daughter. I went to Beyonce with my daughter. And just spent that whole year recharging. Now I'm back and ready to go.
Oh, you was beehiving with your daughter.
Beehiving all the way.
Beehiving, that's what I'm talking about. Amber, tell the folks who you are. You've been out here doing this work for a long time. Tell them who you are.
Yeah, my name's Amber Dalton. I've been in the industry for over 20 years now, actually, from a little group called the PMS Clan, which was an all-women's organization that was founded not intentionally back then. You know, that wasn't a known thing. We just, out of the sheer love of finding some other girls online one day who were I'm just gonna say it, ass players, just like my sister and I were. We were like, let's go play some games. We were killing everyone, winning on these online, like, let's start a group, you know? So that was where the PMS Clan was founded. At our heyday, we had about 7,000 girls globally on all three platforms. It was, we started in console because I think a lot of people don't realize that that's kind of where DI can start, is these easy access platforms. So mobile was not a thing yet, but that is now one that we have. Console was it in the day, so Xbox, PlayStation, and then we evolved into our PC platform as well. And we probably had about 30 to 40 teams competing globally in all of the circuits in their countries. Some of them were international competitions. And then, so about 12 years ago, a friend of mine sent me a link, like, hey, look at this company, look at this job, and I'm reading this little description for business development with a company called Twitch. That was starting off of Justin TV.
Just a little small, right?
Maybe y'all know that?
You might know what it is.
Yeah.
You might know what it is.
Amazing founders, but I went in to interview with them because back then you could only win about $500, maybe $1,000 in tournaments. There were a couple of big ones. You know, you had Jonathan Fatality Window winning 100 grand tournaments and things like that in the PC realm, thanks to people like Mark over from Intel, Mark Tang, who has always been there supporting all the esport initiatives. You couldn't make a living doing it. And I saw that job and I was like, this is how women can make a living, and gamers in general could make a living from their passion in games. They could monetize. They didn't need to be number one. We weren't placing number one in tournaments, but we were placing championship brackets. Top 16 in MLGs, top 8s in World Cyber Games. We had a pedigree. We were placing against hundreds and sometimes even thousands of teams, but you couldn't make money. So Twitch, I was like, this is me. When I went into my interview, I I don't think maybe some of my panelists thought I was right for the position, but I told the COO, Kevin Lynn, and I don't know who knows Kevin Lynn here? Oh yeah, exactly. I think Twitch is where it is today, not just because it's a great platform and system, but because of his passion and dedication to the piece. But I told him, I think some people didn't want to maybe hire me, but I'm your girl. Trust me, let me walk out. There's no one that's going to believe or want this company to succeed as much as I do. We need this. As a gaming community, we need this, and I will help make this work. And he basically said, yeah, you're coming with us, let's go. And then here I am today, 12 years later, still loving what I do, building TwitchCon every year. I work doing the brand integrations for our show. I create all of the sponsorship packages. I help make sure all of the sellers and the BPS brand partnership studios have all the information they need to successfully execute brand partnerships at TwitchCon.
TwitchCon, just a little small conference, that they had at the convention center a couple days ago. So, Angela, you talked a lot about culture when you were introducing yourself to the people, right? Let's elaborate on that. You as a leader, what are some of the things that you think are necessary that leaders need to do in order to really have the right culture at your company, at your business, and just really having that whole culture in your workspace?
I think culture is the personality of its leadership. And so it's not enough to talk about, and I also think culture is overused, right? And culture is really how people experience your organization. So you can say, hey, we believe in this, we believe in that, but if your leaders are acting very differently, that becomes your culture. So I think as a leader, it is always important to emulate the type of culture and role model that the whole time. I think at Riot, I walked into a situation in 2019, I think day 3 there was a walkout. My first 2 weeks, day 3 there was a walkout. And what I recognized is that people were hurt, that the company felt that the company let them down. They were broken in so many different ways, and they didn't feel heard. And there's a thing about feedback and feeling heard, and I say sometimes, you can have an ugly wrapping, there's a gift inside that. That's how I think about feedback. So I may come out, if I'm trying to be heard, and my daughter told me this once, that some type of African proverb that children would burn down their village to feel its warmth. Yep. And that's exactly what was happening. And I listened. I listened to what the pain was, I listened to what the hurt was, I could hear the stories. And this is something I talk about a lot. I changed the code of conduct in the first month. And when I tell you that was such a game changer, first people felt heard, and when I tell you what I changed, so we had a code of conduct, and we had a romantic dating process, things that I heard around how people were being asked out. So in that language, and it's still there today, you can only ask someone out once, you cannot ask them out on Slack, you cannot have your friend ask them out. All of that's in our code of conduct. And you would think, why would you write that in? First, because that's the stories I was hearing, and it stopped immediately. So when people feel heard, and then we start to rebuild trust. And so it is so important that as leaders, as much as the package might be ugly and you feel attacked, look for the gift inside, because people are telling you things, and I don't think Riot or any of these companies that have gone through the reckoning, it doesn't happen in one shot. People are trying to tell you things. And you either choose to hear them in a very different way, or you become that's them and this is me. And you can't have an us and them culture, because you will always be in conflict, and guess what, you won't get the games out. So my goal was, we had 4 games we're trying to get out. What type of conditions do we need to have? And how do we need to listen? And I would tell you my first month was just listening to people, asking them. I've been doing this work for 20 years. What I realized is there's no playbook. There was no playbook about what we were going through at the time. There was only you have to rebuild it. And so that's what we had to do, and that meant I had to listen differently. We had to, we were a company that is 50 is different from a company that's 200 than a company that's 2,000. The second thing is your processes have to mirror what you're trying to do. And sometimes process gets in the way of doing the right thing. So if I would say something and they'll go, well, that's not our process, that's not the right thing. So don't be limited by your process. You can change them, you own the company. So we changed a lot of processes. We created processes that were consistent because there was inequity in some of those things. And as a leader, I had to listen. I had to emulate so that we could build trust. It couldn't be, I'm a leader and you're a rioter, right, or you're a worker. It is, we are in this together, we're all trying to ship these games. The second thing is around the pandemic, which was tough for everybody. It was tough, and people were crispy. If you have Slack channels, people were really crispy on Slack, and people were burned out. And so I went to the leadership team, and it was very unpopular. I'm like, you know what, we need a day. And what I loved about the leadership team was like, give them a week. And so every year, we have two breaks at Riot, one in the summer, one in the winter. And it's little things like that that really rebuild your trust, rebuild your culture, because you can hear. Because once I hear you, you can fix it. So my advice to any new company or company that's out there, listen, because it's not a one-time event that something happens and people just go off. It is like they are trying to talk to you, and we're not hearing in the way that we need to. And I had to take a step back. I couldn't hear as a leader, I had to hear as a human.
I like that last part. You had to hear as a human. That was a real good part. And piggybacking on that, Amber, as Angela was talking about listening, right? When you started PMS and when PMS was really starting to make a name for itself, how important was people to hear your voices as you were starting, as you was moving forward, as you were developing and creating that culture around PMS? How important was your voice at that time in place as you were doing PMS and as you move forward?
Yeah, I think the importance of the voice wasn't just my voice, it was the entire representation of the girls I was bringing into those tournaments. Just being able to sit across from the competitors, play, and either win or lose, cross that stage or across that table, however you're playing, and shake the hands of your opponent, say good game. That was something I know that I don't think anyone did. I think we were the first team that did that, but to me, that was just, common decency when you're playing in a competition. You do it even in high school, you go through and you're on your basketball teams, high-fiving the team that you just played, saying good game. And so those kind of sport, kind of good game mentality pieces being brought in, but the women that were there, just being there and being represented, right? That's what matters, being at the table. And then what was really great is the industry at first, I don't think they knew what to think. In fact, the first tournament we went into, the women's bathroom had a sign over it that said men. They weren't expecting women, and they wanted us to walk all the way down to the end of the convention center to the other women's restroom. I'm like, no, sir, you will remove this, please. You have women here that will be using this restroom, and they absolutely did. They didn't do it out of malice or anything other than they had not had women competing yet. So, having a seat at the table, being invited to the table. I tell my friends all the time, I didn't even think to ask for a seat. I just took a seat and sat down. And I think that's when you were talking about this intentional. To me, there was no other way. To the girls, there were no other way because we hadn't yet seen what we were up against. And then as the years go through, and especially even as more players come in the scene, it's a numbers game, y'all. And there's this thing that happens with women around this 11, 12, childhood years, 13, where they just diverge on different paths. And it's a number game. And I know everyone wants to solve that numbers game. And so how do we reach them and bring a seat to the table? So my voice, not the most important. It's everyone's voices, from the organizers that are doing it, using the lens that is oh so needed, from the players that are playing, from the fathers and mothers that have children at home. And when you choose to give that Barbie doll to your daughter or that controller, you can make an impact. So, thank you for that.
So, when we talk about when the pandemic hit, a lot of people really pushed a lot of DE&I initiatives, around that time, especially with George Floyd. That was a crazy, crazy period of time. And I know from a vantage point and perspective of a lot of people, sometimes when those corporations did some things, it kind of seemed tokenistic, right? So, and I'll give this question to both of y'all. I want both of you guys to answer this. Yeah,
this is your subject matter expert right here.
Absolutely. We were talking about that while we were at the table, right? So, Angela, how do we ensure that diversity initiatives don't come across as tokenistic, but come across as genuine?
This is a big question, but let me say this.
I told you I had some good ones.
No, I start with this. 50% of women play games. There you go. That's your why. Was it like 80% of African Americans play games? If I want those players, I have to represent what they are. And so if I start with that premise first, then I can see the opportunity that diversity, equity, inclusion will bring me. If I see it as something that it needs to be fixed, then it becomes performative. And once you fix it, it's like, okay, it's over. So and I think that's what you're seeing now. It was something to be fixed. And then now it's like, you see now Chief Diversity Officer is leaving. You see all those dollars that we put out. When, you know, I don't want to make a statement. I was one of those who was like, don't make a statement unless you are really going to do this and you're going to do it well. And don't feel pressure to make a statement. I'd rather come back a year later and say, let me tell you what we've done, versus trying to be performative. I thought that was totally performative in that way. I think, you know, I'll tell you this story that I tell all the time. It was about this, it's the story of Senna. And she is just a badass woman in League of Legends. So Senna is the wife of Lucian. And when we first were thinking about Senna, Senna was very fair, more European features. And we leveraged our ERG, Riot Noir. And they said, if you're gonna make Senna, you need to make Senna for real. And so Senna went from this kind of European-esque character and champion to having dreadlocks, mocha brown skin, and I think that set off, and I'll never forget one of the creators said, I don't have to, and it was a white dude, he's like, I don't have to default to white. Diversity represents beauty. Diversity was in Rotera, and it was one of the 7th ranked champions in the game. So not only she was badass, and she represented. And I remember a little girl come in and saying, I never played League. Thank you for making Senna. And then you see Mel and Arcane, and I think that started us to say, wow, this diversity is beautiful, but people need to see themselves in the game that you're making. They need to see them authentically. And so I start there. I start from the outside in. Who's playing your games, or who could be playing your games that's not playing your games? Who's buying your skins, and how are those skins being represented? And I think that brings the authenticity. Then inside I can say, how do I allow people to every talent you bring in is talented. I would assume that your process is great. What happens is when you get in and you don't feel you belong, you don't feel like your ideas are considered. Imagine someone saying, we want to make Senna authentic, and the person who is making that character says, I don't care. I'm going to make Senna the way I want to say it. The other example I would give, H&M. Everyone know H&M? H&M did an ad maybe 3 years ago, and I know because they wanted me to come and do their diversity efforts. And it had a little black boy in a t-shirt that said, coolest monkey in the jungle.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Now, what's wrong with that ad?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And I said, there's 3 ways that happen. That's 3 ways that make it to market. First, you have no diversity in the room saying, no, that could be offensive. 2, you have diversity, but people don't feel included or they belong, so they said something, and you dismiss that idea. Or you had someone who had quit and stayed or just totally disengaged because of the way they were treated, and they're like, you know what, I'm gonna let y'all do that. That's how things like that get into market. So I look at it from, if you want to have authentic representation or authentic goals around DEI, your leadership has to know their why. And if they don't know their why, don't do it. Otherwise, it looks performative. And you have to see diversity, as uncomfortable as it is, as something that's an opportunity for you to grow, to bring great talent, all of those things, and not something like that you have to fix. And I think most companies see it as short-term, I have to fix. And I will tell you, I talk to some clients, and if I say diversity, they just wince. They think diversity means representation, and it does, but it also means, I'm an accountant, right? I'm a very visual, strategic person. And every year my account goes, wah, 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 this much money. That's all I hear. That's all I hear from my house teacher the whole time. If I don't have that accountant, I'm in jail. So I have to value the skill set that she brings. And so this is about valuing the skill sets and letting people help you be better. And you have to see it even if it's uncomfortable. You gotta sit in discomfort. I think people are afraid to have this topic because they're afraid they're gonna say the wrong thing. We have to be willing to say the wrong thing. We have to give people grace when they do, so that we can get to the conversation.
Grace is important.
Yeah, I want to tail on that actually, because you just said a really powerful thing. Because a lot of times companies are scared. They're scared to do the wrong thing. That's going to perceive the wrong way, and that stops them from supporting. And I remember, I'm not a DI speaker for Twitch at all. I come from that PMS clan lens when I'm up here, but I do have experience in a company that I do feel has valued and done a lot to try to support diversity, including well before the pandemic. DI initiatives for front page promotions, always using a lens to make sure that we had everyone represented. In some ways, our guilds that are there available for the not only our community but also internal guilds, from our Black guilds to our Asian guilds to our LGBTQ plus guilds, like they're all there and giving a resource. Now it is up to those guilds to make those pieces forward. You can only create a space. It's up to everyone in their communities to move those forwards, but they're there, they're listening. But I do remember a specific scenario once where there was an emote that was launched for a certain, how the time of months come every year. That's when companies rally around different initiatives. We always rally, but we're definitely going to live during those months too. And the emotes weren't appreciated very much by the community. And it was actually created by our Latinx guild. But no one knew that, and it was never said to that. It was literally just an apology went out that they were perceived wrong. And I remember such an impactful statement coming from our CEO, who I think came a long way down that path from where we started 12 years ago to where he was. But he said, we're going to get things wrong, but I would rather be there trying and getting things wrong than never trying at all. And remember that. And that's how companies, don't be afraid, like you said, have grace if someone does get it right or wrong. Have grace and understand what's the initiative, what's the motive, and start from there. If it's from the heart, if you can see they're trying, just help them learn, and they'll do better next time.
Real quick, if you guys want to ask these two lovely ladies a question, make sure y'all scan that QR code and you guys can ask a question and it'll pop up on the screen.
Yeah, there was a woman that could not connect with me, and I'm trying to understand why, because I'm likable, at least I think I am.
You are. Absolutely.
In my head, I'm likable. And she said, Angela, can I ask you a personal question? I'm like, I don't know you like that, but she said, is it Black or African American? Imagine something as small as not knowing how to properly talk about my kind of race stopped her from engaging with me because she was so afraid that if she said the wrong thing, I would just cancel her. This notion of cancel culture is stopping the conversations that we need to have. We need to have a culture of inclusion and collaboration and all of those things, and we have to extend grace. Even if, as a Black woman, if someone asks me a question, I can say, why are you asking me that? I have to be willing to engage because it's a partnership. And we don't move, and if I'm afraid to give someone feedback because I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing, you're not helping that person. And I think we got to get out of this notion of, I totally agree with you, get it wrong to say, hey, I got this wrong. I get things wrong all the time. You are going to make mistakes in this. You got to create a culture that allows you to do that. I don't say positive intent, because sometimes people don't give a lot of positive intent. I think that's a culture thing for me, but I will give people grace.
So with that being said, given that grace, right, I noticed, Angela, me and you were talking about it briefly. So the Fortnite championships were, I think it was last week or the week before, right? And I actually seen a video on TikTok with the Fortnite championships. Stephanie, how much time do I have?
There's a timer right here. Can you see it?
Oh, okay. Oh, shoot, I don't have too much time at all. But I'm still going to ask this question.
And he can't see it.
Yeah, I couldn't.
It's for the right-handed people.
Yeah, it's for all the right-handed people. I couldn't see it at all. So, like I said, the Fortnite Championships, there was this one video on TikTok. If you guys go to their TikTok, you'll see it, right? And it had a video of everybody walking in, right? The only faces that I saw walking in were either Asian faces or white faces. I didn't see any Black faces. I'd see no women. walking into that Fortnite championship. Amber, what would you say to the women who really want to be in this space and they want to compete in League of Legends, they want to compete in Call of Duty, Fortnite? What would you say to those women who are trying to get into this space?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say it is a challenge. Everyone knows this. For women just to be identified as a player to these teams, to these leagues. What are great players doing? A lot of them are muting their mic because we're an online community, and you never know you're playing. This person that just trounced you 3 times over was a girl. Because she's not going to open her mouth because she's just going to get attacked or bullied or, some sexist comments. Sometimes they're good too. I'm not going to say it's all bad. But you have to have a place that they can be identified. And so I think there is value in women events, and I'm starting to see those. I myself always chose to compete against guys because to me in my head, that's where I was and that's where our girls were, but we didn't have the option, right? And we just kind of went into when you had Pro-Am events. There's very little Pro-Am events like the Intel Land Fest type places or the Dream Hacks, and I think that having this space, so for the women, I'm going to tell you, you need to go find those spaces that you can be identified. Unfortunately, you don't have the luxury to mute your mic and just play a game if you want to be there. They have to be able to see you and hear you. So get out there, get into the events, into the Pro-Am events, join up with guys and girls that are welcoming you, embracing you, and get visible. Get on streaming. All of these ways are how they identify guys at times, and girls need to do the same thing to have that space.
And I want to get to 2 more things before we go. Angela, I know we were talking about the barriers to access. So when we talk about black faces in the gaming industry, there's layers of barriers of access. And everybody in here, please, when you go back home to your organization, scream to the mountaintops for women, scream to the mountaintops for the LGBTQ, scream to the mountaintops for the black and brown faces, because we're here, we're good, and we are in a position to compete. So Angela, could you just real quick talk about these barriers that black and brown people face all the time just to get into this space?
So I grew up on the south side of Chicago. And I grew up, my mom was a barmaid, my father was a doorman. And so part of what I know in esports is that when you're playing, consoles probably easier, but when you're PC, it's access. So how many people, I just bought my nephew, plays Fortnite, all of the gaming equipment he needed. It was easily $3 grand. So you don't have access to that. So there are so many people who can play games, and they're playing console, but they can also play PC, but you gotta give them access. Some people don't have internet. And so I think that is a real barrier for what you're seeing in Fortnite, because we don't have the access or the material, not the capability, we have that, but not the access to material. I grew up in the south side of Chicago, very good story. I took an ACT test. I was the first to go to college in my family. And I remember these 2 passages. It was Shakespeare. It was King Lear and some other Macbeth. And I had to do an analogy between the 2. I never heard of Shakespeare. We didn't have any books about Shakespeare. But someone was going to make a determination if I was smart enough to go there at university based on something I didn't have access or opportunity to even know. So we have to see people as raw talent. So I look at, plugging right or not plugging right, but South Solar Impact is a place where they have gaming equipment where people can go. All these, we have to get our kids to go there so that they have the access to do it. And so I think that is really fair. The other thing I would say about women in games, because I remember before I came to Riot, someone said they had to have a gender-neutral name in the game. I thought that was awful. That is awful, not to be authentically who you are in the game. And so when we started with Game Changers, and they were bringing that up as a concept, I thought it was fabulous. I thought, you know what? Let's build community so that people got the confidence, they could play their games unapologetically, and then let's integrate. And let's build a community where if you talk about somebody in the game, I'm gonna come back at you. So we gotta build that community, and organizations have to be really clear about when you make violations in those games, they're reported, that we are taking those things seriously. And I know they did 1,000. I was on the council that would look at those things and determine how people would stay in this game. And I don't think one company will do it. I think every company needs to do it. And we have to be connected in a way so that if you mess up in one game, then you might be not invited into the next.
Ouch. Yeah. So we got one question on the screen, and then we'll close it up. Either one of you guys can answer this question. What can be done by smaller organizations to promote better diversity, equity, and inclusion practices in the industry?
both of us can say something on this, but I think we already tapped into some of those kind of pieces. It's using that lens, right? Just making sure that the opportunity's there. When you see closed leagues, which is where the evolution of esports is going, right? We've got these closed leagues. Unfortunately, that's not going to be very inclusive, at least not at this point, because in order to get them at that level, we need all of those pro-am events up there training, again, where the talent can be ID'd. So at the smaller organizations, you're the perfect people. Where we're having problems is with the IP owners, actually, right? Game companies can be very defensive of their IP. They want to protect their leagues. They don't want competition from sponsors coming in. The IP owners really need to take a step back and say, do we want esports to succeed? Because your game will be gone in 5 years. Do not doubt that, for all the game owners. Who's going to have the next game? You need to work together with all the game companies. What Angela just said really attracted me. Like, you break it in one, you break it in all. We've been known as a community. We've always been together, right? Together for whatever. So step back. Let's not get all Hollywood bling lights on, and step back and take a moment with real people, real places, and know that you're all going to make money as you go. You just need those right steps to do it.
Stephanie, is my time over?
You are way over.
I'm
Yeah.
way over.
Sorry, I was just going to say, what I love about smaller companies, I know I'm over, so you should never give me a mic. I might start breaking out a song. You never know.
Do it.
I might. You can be diverse on purpose. You have the opportunity to build it so that you don't need a person like you. And that's always my goal. You can look at your table around the folks and say, who's in my organization and who am I missing? And go get that person. And it doesn't mean less than, it means and. I can get someone who's a woman and she's phenomenal. And we've seen that work. I think sometimes we think, if I hire a woman, or do I hire talent? And so you can be diverse on purpose. You can look around your table and say, who am I missing? What perspective needs to be here so that I am thinking about this, the things that I don't even think about. And even if that person makes me uncomfortable, let me just sit in that for a minute until I get through it.
Okay, I think we got to close this on now. So please, everybody, give it up for Miss Amber. If you guys have more questions, please feel free to come